The laws that govern the world of Disboard allow for some pretty interesting things to happen. Through the results of games, one could force someone else to fall in love, or even become the owner of someone's personal rights, all the way up to owning the rights of an entire race of beings. These rules are absolute and binding by the covenants put in place by God himself. So, the results of the games will be enforced as much as possible. But what are the actual limitations to those rules? That is a question that Sora was wondering in a scene that was completely cut from the anime. While Sora, Shiro, Jabril, and Steph are waiting for Kurumi and Phil to show up to have their game of Existence Othello before they actually go and challenge the War Beasts to their game, they are waiting in the throne room, and Sora decides to do some experimenting when it comes to the limitations of the Covenants. This scene is included in the prologue of Volume 3 and was cut completely from the anime. It wasn't shown, which does make sense given how it would kind of disrupt things with the way that Episode 8 leads off and how it leads directly into Episode 9, continuing on that Sora has disappeared and Shiro is worried about him. So while I do understand why it was cut from the anime, I do think this scene is important to discuss as it gives us insight into Sora's mentality and how he thinks about the world, the rules of games, and how he tries to find loopholes in them. Also throughout this scene, we see exactly how Steph and Jabril both view Sora through the results of the games that are testing the Covenants. Now, Sora's curiosity begins by, of course, him pursuing his lechery as normal and wanting to see if he can actually become female. And Jabril points out that it's probably not possible, because the Covenants, although they can enforce things like falling in love or, becoming someone else's property, they can't actually do something that is theoretically impossible. The Covenants can't actually force someone's body to morph if it's not innately able to do that. And even further than that, Jabril points out it actually probably wouldn't be possible for Sora to get a life. You know, how in the last few episodes, how Sora was so eager to accept that bet from Steph to try to be fulfilled IRL? Well, that probably wouldn't be possible. Jabril points out that probably within the nature of the Covenants, he would at least believe that he was fulfilled IRL, but wouldn't actually be able to get a life. So he would just think he had a life. And to Sora, that's a fate worse than death, so he thinks that it's probably best that he should test the limitations of the Covenants. And so Shiro suggests, why not try a simple personality change? And Sora agrees that that's a good idea. So he ends up challenging Steph to a game, with the wager being that if Steph loses, she becomes Sora for 30 minutes, to see how far the Covenants can be pushed if Steph can actually become a copy of Sora, if she can gain that same level of skill. And that is what Steph is thinking as well. She thinks that this might be her one opportunity to be able to beat Sora. She knows that as she is now, she doesn't even stand a chance. She has no idea how she could possibly be able to beat this guy. But if she was able to become Sora through the absolute power of the Covenants, then maybe she would stand a chance. So they decide to play chess, and within 40 seconds, a mere 5 moves, Steph's utterly defeated. And this is Sora alone, not Chessmaster Shiro, but just Sora. Sora's still pretty skilled at all types of games, including chess, way above average, just Shiro kind of eclipses that. Regardless, Steph loses pretty much immediately, and her personality completely changes once the game ends, and the wager is enforced by the Covenants. She becomes vulgar and arrogant and starts talking down to Sora, saying that now it's time for you to get a taste of your own medicine. When I beat you in a game, I'm going to make sure that you are a good person, a kind person for the rest of your life. And also has some interesting mannerisms, constantly flipping his hair back and forth, or flipping her hair back and forth. This is how Steph views Sora, as an arrogant, vulgar individual. But it's also noted that Sora's never flipped his hair back and forth like that at all before, acting like some pretty boy. And this being how Steph sees Sora, she sees him as arrogant and vulgar, but considering he's acting like a pretty boy, this is also showing that attraction that she has to Sora, regardless of his negative qualities. But this overall interaction weirds Sora out. He doesn't like the version of himself that Steph is portraying, and even asks Shiro for confirmation. And Shiro says, yeah, this is kind of way off. And so Sora does accept Steph's challenge to a game, the same game as before, a game of chess. And do you want to know the result, as Steph has now become Sora? Well, she loses in another 40 seconds, with the wager that was placed being that she turned back into Steph right now. And once she does, she's upset that she lost. She doesn't get it. I thought I was finally going to be able to, have his skill set and be able to finally beat him. And Jabril points out, well, as I mentioned, things that are theoretically impossible cannot be enforced by the covenants. Which makes Steph think, well, I can never beat him then? It's theoretically impossible for me to actually win against him? But that's not what Jabril was referring to. It is theoretically impossible for her to just manifest all of his memories, all of his experiences, and even though Steph referred to herself as the greatest gamer in the world while she was transformed into Sora, she wouldn't be. She realized that without Shiro, she couldn't be the greatest gamer in the world. Not to mention she'd also need Sora's experience and his knowledge and everything that he has. She only became the version of Sora that she saw in her mind, as much as possible, meaning she was only able to emulate that personality. But this wasn't enough testing, as these were only humanity. So why not test with a higher race? So Sora challenged Jabril under the same conditions, that if she lose, she becomes Sora for 30 minutes. And Jabril, being subservient to Sora, lost intentionally. And upon losing and the covenants being enforced, Jabril actually starts to physically transform, because Jabril is a being made of spirits. And apparently, if you're made of spirits, you can physically change your form. She transforms into a perfect copy of Sora. And at first, Sora's quite impressed by this, until 8 golden wings start sprouting from Sora's back, and a massive, complex, geometrical halo appears over the transformed Jabril's head, and she starts lording over them. I am the weakest, yet also the strongest, the one who would command God and bring him to his knees. Honestly, the interactions with Jabril in the light novel are incredible. I highly recommend you pick up the light novel if you haven't already. It's such a better experience, especially with Volume 3, because this wasn't the only scene that was cut from the anime. There are a couple others which are significant, as we'll get into in later videos, but this was pretty interesting to say the least. Sora is a bit taken aback by this transformation as well, but he also understands that it makes sense, given that Jabril sees her masters, the ones that she chose to be subservient to, in particular Sora, but that'll be addressed later on in the light novels. She sees him as a god, equivalent to her creator, Artosh, and so the visage of him that she has is similar in nature. Artosh does have a massive geometrical halo and 8 golden wings. We never see him in the anime or the movie, but we get a brief image of him in the light novel. And the visage that she takes upon losing this game is to transform into Sora while also having the godly characteristics of her creator. But she still does not have the skill set or memories of Sora. She can physically transform into a visage that is identical to Sora, minus the halo and the wings, but she still doesn't have the things that actually make Sora Sora. And so Sora realizes the limitations of the covenants. You can't actually push a being beyond their own physical limitations through the results of the covenants, which is disappointing to him. Because if you could, and he mentions this, if you could push someone beyond their limitations, then you could possibly or potentially have the ability to give humanity magic. And by this, I'm guessing he means you could put more spirits into their bodies or give them the ability to take on higher races on equal footing using magic and things of that nature. And he says a phrase that kind of takes Steph and Jabril's breath away. He says, I guess it's not that easy to find loopholes in the covenants. This is something that Steph and Jabril had not even considered. The absolute and immutable rules put in place by God, Sora was trying to find loopholes in. And there are a couple. There's some wiggle room within the covenants, but not loopholes of this grand nature. But this is the type of person that Sora is. And once again, he kind of flabbergasts Steph and Jabril. The last little thing that's included in this scene is Sora wanting to maybe push this emulation to its highest degree. So he asks Shiro to defeat him, and so he can become a copy of Shiro. Because he's lived alongside Shiro for 8 years now and knows her mannerisms, how intelligent she is, and everything of that nature, if he is able to emulate her even like 50%, that could still be very useful later on in games. But Shiro doesn't exactly want him to do that, because that would make her just a little bit uncomfortable, and so she turns the question on Sora, asking, "Would you want me to turn into a version of you?" And Sora immediately said, "Oh god, no, that would be horrible. The worst result, finding out how you truly feel about me? Yeah, that'd be worse than death." So that kind of ends that right there. But this scene does go to show that Sora is constantly trying to get a leg up, trying to find more information and understand the rules of the game that is being played, the rules of this world, better than anyone else. Because if you have more information than your opponent, if you understand the limitations that are possible and can work within them better than anyone else, then you will always have the advantage in anything that you do, whether a game or otherwise, really. Even in life, if you understand things more than other people, you can often find a way to get ahead, give yourself the advantage, or just put yourself in a better position to succeed. And this is what Sora is trying to do throughout all of the light novels, but this scene in particular highlights it very well, and I think it is very important to touch on. But let me know down in the comments below what you think of this extra little scene that was cut from the anime in Volume 3 of the light novel. As I mentioned before, there are a couple other scenes that were cut from the anime, some that I think are very important, and I will be covering those in the next video, so make sure to subscribe to the Daily Flugel and stay tuned for that. Follow me on Twitch as well. I stream every Tuesday and Saturday, link in the description below. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Ashente.